One Percenter Podcast with Sam Bakhtiar, bringing you the 1% knowledge to help you reach your full potential. Learn what it takes to rise above the 99% and become a 1%er.
All right, doctor. So my number one question for you is, why is the divorce rate so high these days?
Oh, well.
We're going to go right into it.
That's a great question. I think the reasons that we're seeing an increase in divorce are multiple. I think people are busier than they've ever been. We have so much more technology, which in theory makes communication so much easier, but really what we're seeing clinically is that it results in a breakdown of communication because technology gives us a buffer, which means that we get a little bit more distant from our partner's reactions and from the way that we actually regulate and how our bodies feel in the presence of people's communication. I think we have a lot of FOMO that goes on in our culture right now, right? So true. And people are constantly curious about what's going on in their neighbor's yard and the neighbor 2 states down the way's yard, and we're not focused on appreciating what we have going on because we live in a constant state of comparison with all of social media and just seeing everybody's shiny parts being blasted all over.
So true. I never thought of it that way. All I know is in my former country, I'm from Iran. When we left Iran in 1985, we had 3 channels, 3 TV channels.
3?
And every night we found something good to watch. And now I have like 1,200. And we always say, there's nothing to watch. There's like too much, there's too many things that you cannot concentrate on.
Right.
So I think that's kind of, I think, that might be, comparable to the divorce rate. And I heard like in Orange County, divorce rates are like about 70%.
Wow, well, I don't know the statistics for Orange County, but I think you're spot on. We have so many opportunities to be stimulated in terms of what we see, what we hear, what we feel in our world, and it does sometimes create a lot of discontent, and we don't know how to stay present. And when we don't know how to stay present, it becomes really easy to look outside of ourselves, look outside of our relationships for opportunities for other things to regulate us or stimulate us and get us excited.
It is crazy because I personally have found out that I have an inverse relationship with the more time I am on the phone and how happy I am.
Yeah, of course.
When I'm on the phone constantly, I'm not happy. When I'm happier. So I made it a rule that when I come home at 4 o'clock, I put the phone away.
Oh, wow.
I made it a rule now, like last night, me and my wife went on a date, and I didn't take my phone. And today's Friday. Last weekend, we went to my brother-in-law's wedding. And I just left the phone at home for 2 days.
Wow, good for you.
For 2 days, and I'm like, you know what, I'll deal with it, when I come back. Right. And so now I made it a new goal. Friday at 3 till Sunday at 5, no phone. No phone? Yes.
So I'm curious, when you started putting down the phone, did you experience any kind of withdrawal from it?
I did a little bit because I'm like, I wonder what's going on, what's going on. And I know that's that dopamine release. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's that dopamine release that everybody is on. And I can, I just don't want to be that guy. I don't want, I sat down and I asked myself, what's the most important thing in my life? And that's to be present with my family, spend time with my family. Yeah. Here are my top 3 priorities in life. Spend as much time with the family as possible, provide for them, and be healthy so I can do number 1 and 2. So then I was like, wait a second. If I'm trying to work and trying to make money, that's number 2 priority. Then I'm actually giving up number 1 priority. That's inverse. Right. So I made it a point. I'm very, very in tune with it. It's really hard though. I wholeheartedly believe that giving up phone, because the phone is a new crack.
Well, yes. Yeah. And it's so addictive because it is encroached on pretty much every domain of our lives and made it so much easier to live in a lot of ways, right? I never have to pick up a paper map anymore. I never have to ask for directions. I don't have to consult my paper calendar. I don't have to even carry a calendar. I mean, everything is right there in the palm of your hand with the advent of these smartphones. And listen, they're fantastic in so many ways. But I think what we are now seeing and we're catching up on is looking at the long-term negative implications of being too reliant on technology. And when we put our phones down, I think it creates kind of an existential terror within us because we don't always know where we're going to find answers, how we're going to find directions, how we're going to connect with people. And it literally does create a physiological dysregulation for many people. And that's one of the beauties of setting it down and learning how to tolerate that and kind of reorganize your system so that you can be okay.
It's so funny you say that because last weekend, like I said, when I was in San Diego, you know, I had a little heartburn and we were at a hotel and I got directions to go to 7-Eleven to get like some Tums. And as I was walking, I got a little lost, you know, and I'm like, where's my phone? I can put it, and I didn't have my phone. I actually had to like use landmarks like when I was a kid. I'm like, okay, I think I passed this building.
Yes.
And I have to actually problem solve and actually be smart for a second rather than relying on a device. You have
the benefit of having that historical education. For people who have grown up.
Never without it, right?
Right. They really, I think, are at a disadvantage because learning life skills without YouTube right in front of you or without your phone to phone a friend or, you know, text someone and say, what am I supposed to do? What am I doing? It really, I think it flummoxes people at a level that older people, you know, our age probably just can't even fathom. Yeah.
Now, do you, in your practice, do you see this often? Does somebody come to you? I know you see everything.
Yeah.
You know, I know. You know, I've seen some of your interviews. I mean, you deal with so many things I can't even pronounce. You know, I was reading over. I'm like, what is that? You know, and but do you deal with phone addiction? Do you see somebody coming in and like, Doc, you know, I'm just addicted. I need help.
Yes. So there are several people who are coming in for therapy with me, with other colleagues and other treatment programs, and they recognize the level of addiction that they have to their devices, whether it's their phone, an iPad, a computer, some amalgamation of all of those things. And it is really difficult for them to find alternative strategies to living because they're getting their community through their technology, they're getting sexual arousal through their technology, they're getting all of their education through technology, and they don't know what to do without it. Plus, then we factor in the ritualization that our body goes through when it accesses technology in this certain way, right? Now I'm holding my phone and I'm doing this. All of you watching know exactly what I'm doing. Why is that? Because most of our bodies have habituated and ritualized this behavior. And so that sends a lot of messages to our brain, and just the ritualization can be challenging to decaffect when we're talking about neural pathways. So, you know, much in the same way, 20, 30 years ago when we were talking about nicotine addictions and the ritualization of taking your hand to mouth and people missing that and recognizing that there was some element in the withdrawal process, we see the same thing happening with people's bodies and their physiological arousal when they start to question and challenge their relationship to technology.
You know, I see it like it's kind of like an OCD loop.
Yeah, it can be.
You go in there and like, you know, you just, you know, do Instagram. Okay, so I wonder what's happening on the Snapchat. I wonder what's on the email.
Yes.
I wonder what's going on in text. I wonder what's going on Twitter. And then you put it down, and then you go right back in.
Totally, totally. Yeah, and it's so ingrained. I mean, my pattern is Instagram this account, Instagram that account. I have a lot of Instagram accounts. Moving through all of them, and then Facebook, and then Snap, and then Twitter, and then email, and then I can take a break. But the pattern is there, right? Yeah.
Now, for people who are, you know, watching this, I know a lot of people here are entrepreneurs. They want to, and I think a lot of people can kind of admit, hey, man, like I'm overdoing this.
Yes.
You know, I'm overdoing this. I think, you know, most people can admit that. you know, but for some reason it gets the best of them. The habitual gets the best of them. How can they reduce that? What are some of the suggestions that you have before it gets too late, before they get divorced, or before they get in a wreck? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I have a few thoughts on how people can start to reorganize their body chemistry and their relationship to technology so that they can protect their relationships with their primary partner, with their children, with their work, and all of that. Because if any one thing gets wobbly and out of balance, it can disrupt everyone's sort of lifestyle and the ecosystem of their lifestyle, right? So when I think about protecting your relationship, one of the things that I recommend is that people put boundaries around the phone in the morning and in the evening, and they wake up and go to bed around the same time with each other so they can create rituals around connection being the primary focal point. So, you know, my partner and I have a rule: we don't touch our phones until we've connected physically in the morning and, you know, had some kind of good morning conversation. And after that, you know, the races can start and we can jump on our phones and get into work. And we do the same thing at night. We put the phones down, and it's really about, you know, connecting with each other and bookending the day with that intimacy. And so when you can make a practice around that, suddenly your relationship to the phone feels a little bit less important because you're getting a lot of those psychological and relational and physiological needs met with the connection one-on-one in person. You know, and in terms of in the car, I mean, obviously it's smart to never text and drive and to not be on your phone. There are a lot of states that have laws against it for obvious reasons, and yet people find themselves doing it. And so
I was notorious for that.
Oh, totally, totally. I've been guilty of it too. And so if you're someone who really struggles with putting containment around the phone, I suggest that you create a blueprint for yourself before you even leave your home or leave your office and get in your car. You know, if you need to put your phone in your backpack or in the trunk or in your purse or somewhere where it's out of reach.
Love that.
Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, you've got to set yourself up for success.
Yes. You know, I remember, you know, for many years when I was growing up in my 20s and 30s, I had a hard time saving money, you know, and I knew that if the money was in my bank account, I would go spend it, you know, so so what I did when I got smarter, you know, when I started getting like in my, you know, early 30s and mid 30s, you know, I'm like, okay, so when the money comes, it's going to automatically go to an account that I don't even have the username and password.
Smart.
You know, like I don't even know, you know, and I can't touch it. It's not, I don't know, it's not there. And that's the only way I was able to kind of, you know, help myself get out of my own way.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and that's so key. You've got to identify the behaviors that are destructive to you. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, what are the behaviors that get in the way of that? What are the triggers that compel you into that behavior? And what are some alternative behaviors that you can put in place proactively so that you're less likely to dive headfirst into those destructive patterns?
So we talked about the cell phone, and we talked about the divorce rate. You know, but it's crazy because this is something that I'm dealing with personally, because I see so many of my close friends, and you know, they're getting divorced, and worse was that so many of the spouses are cheating on each other. You know, and that's like, I just shake my head. I'm like, hey, if you're not happy, just leave. Why cheat? So why do you think? You know, and it used to be like, oh, men do it, and now I see women are just as bad or more. You know, it's like it's getting, you know, I know it's like you know, it's man and woman, but before it was all like, okay, it was all like a men kind of men thing, you know?
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that?
That people cheat for a multitude of reasons. They cheat because they are, well, so I kind of think about it in terms of a few different categories. We cheat because we ultimately are not getting our needs met in some way. Now, that does not mean it's your partner's fault, right? We have to take accountability for our own behavior in relationships, but many people don't know how to do that because they bump up against their needs are not being met, but if they assert their needs or try to get them met with their partner, they might experience shame or disappointment, or they might have a lot of fear about what it means to ask for what they want and need. We construct a lot of ideas about who we are in society based on a lot of the hats we wear and a lot of the roles that we have. So when something that we need conflicts with an idea of who we are based on one of these rules, people can experience a lot of paralysis around asserting themselves.
So if I'm hearing right, you're saying that most of us put up this identity that's really not us.
Well, sometimes. I mean, I think we try to create a value system and live with integrity in that value system, but sometimes our needs conflict with even our own value system or that of our partners, or what we think we're supposed to do because our culture or our religion or our family, the generations of our family have told us this is how we're supposed to be.
The box.
Yeah, and so people feel really pressured to sort of stay contained there, but it isn't actually their authentic selves.
Yes.
And so when people are unfaithful, in my clinical opinion, it's because of a couple of reasons. They're angry about something, whether with their partner or in their life, or intergenerationally because of some traumas or disempowerments that they've had. And sex becomes the foreground and the playground within which they act out their anger, right? Or they're insecure about something, that would be the next category. And so sex becomes a way that they try to elevate their esteem and get validation, right? And then humans we are just animals too. And so we get bored. And so when we're around people for a long time, like our primary partners, we habituate to our partners and we start to lose interest in the things and the people who are around us every day. And so when we bump up against that boredom, where infidelity happens is where we lose touch with our own ability to get creative and to communicate with our partner, or we feel like our partner won't meet us there.
So is that the best way, let's just say somebody's been in a relationship, for a while and they feel bored. What are some things that they should do?
Well, first, I think they should really get in touch with who they are, because we are continuously changing and evolving throughout our lifespan, and it's normal to be bored or to feel discontented at certain points, and to reevaluate who you are and what makes you tick. That's normal. So I think we've got to stop feeling shame around growth and change and evolving. So when we can get really curious about who we are and how we're developing and what our needs are, then we can feel more empowered to talk to our partners and say like, hey, I'm kind of getting a little itchy in this one area of life. I'd like to do something different, or learn a new hobby, or explore a new philosophical idea, or get a new car, or whatever, whatever it is that might give you some traction, right?
Wow. This is like something that's been hitting home a lot lately, like I see it, like people who have been married like 20, 30 years, people who you would have never thought, So when I was in college, when we studied genetics, one thing that genetics taught us, that as human beings, for us to survive, we need to have as many different offsprings and mates, and have the genetics be as diverse as possible. So a homogeneous gene doesn't do as well as like a heterogeneous gene.
Right.
So do you think, when society says, okay, marriage, kids, white picket fence, home, do you think that's against our nature?
That's a great question, and it's one that I get asked a lot. Biologically, we do have different imperatives that sort of drive us, right? And evolution is one of them. So men and women are biologically organized to have, somewhat of a different parenting strategy, or offspring survival strategy, if you will, right?
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so as you were saying, from an evolutionary perspective, men are sort of programmed to create as many opportunities for offspring as is possible. Women are too, but their process is different.
Offspring, right?
Well, also they can only create, so many offspring at a time.
That's true.
Right, because they carry the babies, and then the babies are developmentally dependent on their parents or their caregivers for a long period of time, and women usually are the people responsible for that. So, when we think about maternal and paternal investment, Mama Nature kind of gave us very different
Yes,
imperatives,
roles, yes.
right? And so that's sort of the early underpinnings of human organization. But then we have these big, fancy, sophisticated brains that have kicked in, the cortical parts of our brains, and we have an opportunity to override some of our biology, not all. Right?
So it's kind of hard to rewire your hard drive.
Well, right.
You know, it's like your innate, something that, you know, is like, you know, was in your primal brain, you know, 5,000 years ago, you know, and like you said, we're getting smarter, but you still have that innate, primal brain from so many years ago. And it's just so fascinating.
It is so fascinating, but I think, you know, what's important to remember is that as a society, we've created a lot of social mores and ideals about how we should be as humans. And we created those things because our brains are evolving, and we're constantly trying to understand what is the best way to procure the next generation. And so every generation and every century and sort of every evolution of humans comes with it new information and ideas and opportunities to balance the sophisticated nature of our brains with the more primitive elements of human nature.
Let's talk about drugs.
Okay.
You know, these are like I said, these are topics that I'm interested in. You know, divorce, cell phone, and drugs, right? You know, and I see, you know, when I first started, you know, personal training. You know, I was infatuated with getting myself in shape, and then once I went to school, you know, while I was going to college, I was personal training. Then I started my business, and I couldn't understand that. You know, when people said I'm depressed, I couldn't understand it. I'm like, what do you mean you're depressed? You know, I come from a third world country. We got bombed on, and we had all these issues, and nobody was depressed there. How can you be depressed when you're, you know, pulling up in your S-Class Mercedes? You know, you don't work. You're taken care of. You come to your personal trainer and say, I feel depressed, and I was like, what? You know, and as I got older and wiser and more mature in my, you know, dealings with people and understanding people, then I realized that I think a lot of people are depressed because they really are not living to their potential. They're not really striving for anything. I know for me, I have a certain routine, you know, and as you were coming in, you saw my routine. I got a very regimented routine for me to be at my peak performance, for me to be at my happiest. Right. And when I'm not, you know, fulfilling that routine, I'm like, man, it's like today was a kind of an off day, and all that. So what do you think is the number one cause of depression today? And are we a society that is over-prescribing, you know, prescription drugs?
Those are not the drugs I thought you were going to talk about.
We'll talk about those drugs too. No, we'll talk about those drugs as well.
Well, so first of all, I'm a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. Okay. So I don't want to step outside of the scope of my practice and talk about prescribing. But culturally, and what I'm seeing in my offices and in the research, we have a lot more awareness about mental health issues than we had a long time ago. But to your point around sort of people not living into their potential, and you know, you mentioned being from Iran and going through a lot of what I would describe as, you know, warfare circumstances, right? I don't know that people weren't depressed in those contexts, but they were probably geared for a fight and flight response in those moments. And so the depression likely came later when their bodies were recalibrating against that and going into a state of more of a hypo-aroused instead of hyper-aroused, which is more of where our fight-flight mechanisms are based. So when we think about depression, we think about it in terms of having an overactive parasympathetic nervous system, right? And so people require more stimulation, which goes to your point about not living to their potential. And when people are really excited about something in life, or they have meaning and purpose and passion, it allows their nervous system to stay more regulated in a window of tolerance that allows for optimal, you know, navigation of life's experiences. So when they're bored or if they feel discontented, oftentimes they will kind of slip into a more dysthymic or depressed state. And so are we overprescribing, underprescribing? I don't have an answer to that. But I think there are lots of ways for people to, you know, really address where they feel, I guess, unengaged in their lives and isolated.
You know, I'm, you know, nowhere as savvy. You know everything about it. But to me, I think cure for so much of a depression comes from setting goals, having something to look forward to. Exercising, eating better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not just looking for a pill to fix everything. You know.
Yeah, well, I think that's true with any mental health condition. We have to look at it from a holistic perspective, and it's just like our physical health, our mental health is really rooted in our lifestyle balance and all of the choices that we have available to us and how we can navigate when we don't have choices, right? And so some people are more governed by their biology when it comes to depression or anxiety, and others are more governed by lifestyle choices. But when we are looking at how to find solutions, it is important to address spiritual domains, medical and biological domains, mental health domains, relational contexts. All of that together is going to help someone find better solutions to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, all of it.
Got it. So let's talk about the other kind of drugs.
Okay.
So what do you see rampant in your clinical practice? You know, that you haven't seen. What do you see the trends? You know, the new things that are happening, which maybe wasn't happening 5 or maybe even 10 years ago.
That's a great question. We can talk about pathological trends and misuses of drugs or substances, but what I think is really interesting is kind of a pro-treatment trend that we're seeing around more of the plant-based medicines as treatments for depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. So we're seeing a lot more people getting innovative with this is not a plant-based medicine, but ketamine as a treatment for mental health conditions. You know, historically it was used as a party drug and anesthesia.
I hate to admit it, but I've done ketamine back in my younger days, like 2 or 3 times, and that's nothing you do not want to mess with.
Yeah, I would not recommend messing with it, socially or outside the supervision of a trained licensed medical professional. But I have had medical treatments with ketamine and have seen a lot of tremendous benefits of it. A lot of the physicians that I work with in Los Angeles who are doing ketamine treatments are seeing amazing progress with patients on a myriad of mental health and pain-related conditions. So that's pretty exciting that we're seeing a lot of research that supports this as an indicated treatment for some conditions.
Wow.
Yeah.
And anything else?
We're seeing a lot of trends and research around the use of psilocybin, the use of LSD, the use of MDMA for the treatment of PTSD, depression, anxiety, again, because a lot of the different plant-based medicines can really help people, transition into, how do I want to say this, a slightly different
flow state?
Maybe a flow state, you might call it that. But I think what we're seeing is that people get just enough distance psychologically from whatever it might be that they're struggling with, that they're able to see it, understand it, and repackage it in a way that allows them to get some traction. And so that can be a really cool treatment, and we're just seeing it in early stages of research. So I'm hopeful that as the research continues to demonstrate benefits, it will become more and more accessible to people legally.
Wow, I never thought that. These are like cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
How about marijuana?
What about it?
How about marijuana for treating depression?
Well, I'm not an expert on cannabis as a treatment for any mental health condition. I think for some people it can be really helpful, and for others it can actually perpetuate some of the things that they're struggling with. It really depends on someone's unique relationship to any substance that they might be using and how they are staying on top of its integration into their overall treatment approach.
As far as for mental health, what kind of diet do you recommend? Because I'm a nutritionist and I love the health and fitness industry. What do you find that any particular diet, maybe a high-fat diet versus low-fat diet? Because a lot of research has gone through the benefits of a higher fat diet for your brain function. Can you elaborate on that?
You know what, I'm actually going to punt that back to you because I'm not a dietitian, I'm not an MD, and I don't want to speak out of scope for my practice. And I think every body is different. So what works for one person may not be the ideal regimen for others. And in my work with people around disordered eating and body image issues, a lot of what we focus on is not creating labels around specific kinds of foods, but really looking at kind of how do you understand your relationship to food and learn to trust your body to give you cues around hunger, fullness, and really optimize your nutritional wellness.
Many years ago, I had a client who came in. She was like the perfect American grandmother.
Okay.
You know, and she signed up. You know, everybody loved her, and also, and she went missing. And you know, and I couldn't understand where she went.
Oh no!
And I asked her friend, and the friend was like, "Well, I'll let her tell you when she comes back." And I'm like, "What is going on?"
So someone knew where she was.
Yes,
oh,
but
good.
you know, they didn't want to talk about her condition. So come to find out that she was, you know, a heavier person, and she went and got the lap band surgery. And she had obviously food addiction. And now that she couldn't eat, she has something called addiction transfer, which now her addiction went from food now to alcohol, where then she started going to bars and started getting drunk and then got picked up by the police.
Oh,
you know, like an older grandma. And when I heard about that, you know, I was like, I cannot believe that. That's like grandma. Yeah. You know, can you elaborate on what addiction transfer is and if somebody is trying to give up an addiction, how to replace it?
Absolutely. So, and that's such a great question because a lot of people really don't understand addiction interaction, addiction transfer, as you call it. So here's what happens, right? We have one kind of addiction issue, and usually there's some kind of psychosocial element that has created this foundation for the addiction to thrive in someone's life. So when we get containment in one area, if we're not addressing the underlying issues, just like a game of whack-a-mole, poof, that compulsive behavior, that compulsive strategy for regulating is going to pop up somewhere else. So I see this a lot when I'm working with people and helping them get containment around a substance use disorder or a compulsive sexual disorder or any kind of gambling disorder. You know, we see this sort of oscillation of compulsive strategies, and what we really have to do is look at what are some of the triggers that people have to feeling dysregulated, and then what other strategies can they put in place that are healthy, that are pro-social, that are adaptive for them, because when they can learn how to regulate their nervous system and sit with, you know, the discomfort of a little bit of emotion or a little bit of physiological arousal, then they can learn how to break their need for compulsive strategies.
Wow. So let's say somebody is just starting new. You know, they were in a relationship, good or bad, you know, now they're, you know, and they're like, okay, I've learned a lot from other relationships. I want to start new. You know, what can you do to kind of assure your next relationship doesn't fall apart? I know it's a lot of different things, you know, or maybe you can break it down to men and women, because I think, you know, because at the end of the day, I think everybody wants a little cheat sheet. I know it's not that simple. Like I even like for my daily, you know, I find out what my wife loves. You know, my wife loves an early morning, I love you. You know, and sometimes when I start work, I get really busy. You know, I forget. So I actually have it on my calendar. You know, like,
that's so sweet.
You know, so this way, you know, I'll make it work. Do you have a generic cheat sheet, you know, that we can talk about? You know, hey, you know, I know everybody's different.
Of course.
You know, but there's some universal principles that we can apply.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding your question, it's basically what are some things that we can do to make sure our relationships stay intact? Yeah,
let's just talk about me. I'm just talking about me. What can I do so me and my wife will last forever?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, okay. I think it's important to really remember that in our coupleships, and one of my mentors, Stan Tatkin, is infamous for saying this. I learned this from him. We have to become experts on our partners, right? And protect our coupleship all the time. When we are protecting our coupleship, yes.
I love that word.
Yeah, this is Stan's word. So anybody watching, look up Stan Tatkin and the PACT model of therapy. Okay. So this is the model that I practice from. It's the psychobiological approach to couples therapy. And it's really important to think about, when we are in a coupleship, when we make this coupleship our secure base and our most secure relationship, then we prioritize it, and it becomes something from which we can draw so much strength and so much innovation in our lives and creativity, and then we bring that back to our coupleship. And we're staying in a constant dialogue with our partner about their needs, our needs, and the needs of our coupleship. And we prioritize that above everything else, above our outside family, above our children, above our work commitments, because we understand that when we have a secure, functioning relationship, everything else gets addressed well. But if we don't, then we're going to upend the apple cart and everything else starts getting messy too.
It's easier said than done though, isn't it?
Well, it is. And so when we think about becoming experts on each other, first it has to start with learning about yourself and learning how to be an expert on what your needs are. Where do you get wobbly, right? Where do you get dysregulated? Where are you likely to get angry, shame-based, sad, happy, giggly, nervous? And can you be okay talking about that with your partner? And when we can have that kind of relational vocabulary and authenticity with each other, that is where we're going to build the strongest connection and intimate bond and have the most potential to last forever, or, as long as you both shall live.
What is number one complaint of women about men when they come to you? Give me like top 5 maybe.
Single women or partnered women?
Partnered women.
Partnered women. Usually the women that come to see me, their chief complaint with their male partners, if we're not talking about infidelity, then we're talking about feeling unseen or really sort of minimized and not understood in the relationship. And the women that I work with frequently feel like they don't know how to get their needs met without appearing needy, right? And so I think that's a problem that a lot of men and women struggle with, and men too. They don't want to be burdensome to their partners, and a lot of men that I work with feel like they have to have it all together. They have to have their emotions always perfect and intact. They can't show weakness or vulnerability or fear or any of that because they think that their partner demands for them to be on their game all the time. And women just want to be a part of the inner dialogue that men have, and they want their male partners to want to be a part of their inner dialogue. And I think that, as scary as that can be for everyone, when you can share that with your partner, whether you're male, female, or another anywhere else on the gender continuum, then you have the best opportunity to create a connection that is really meaningful.
And what do the men complain about? Coupled men?
Coupled men?
Coupled men. Sex?
Sometimes.
I have to go here.
Sex is often the superficial reason that brings people in, right?
Okay.
Like men and women come in and they're like, my partner doesn't
I'm that
see
superficial guy.
but no, listen, like we are all superficial until we look a little deeper, right? And so sex is one of the areas of a relationship that often is the catalyst to bring people into treatment. But then once we start talking about, well, why is the sex life disrupted? Then we start recognizing it's because they have all these unmet needs and they don't know how to get them met with each other or within themselves. So a lot of the men that I work with, they'll say things like they kind of feel engulfed, or they feel controlled, or they feel like their wife runs the show and they don't know how to assert themselves without being a jerk. And so we talk about how to, find that balance of assertiveness and also empathy. And then really, like once you can get that magic happening, assertive and empathy, between partners, then everything else kind of works itself out.
Okay, that's great. I think you hit that right on the head. I think you're 100% correct on that. Now let's talk about single. I'm curious, what are single women are complaining about these days about men? What are you guys complaining about?
Well, look, I hear from the single people that I work with a lot, and just reading.
There's no good men left, right?
I hear that in both directions. I hear there's no good women left, there's no good men left, but that's really false, right? I think a lot of women feel used, they feel exploited, they feel like there's nobody who wants to commit, and a lot of men feel used and exploited, and either like women want to commit to drain all their financial resources, or they're just looking for a free ride, and really that's not true on in the majority of circumstances for both genders, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, with all the internet, with all the choices, it just gets harder and harder, I think, to find around. It goes back to those, the 3 channels and to the 1,200 channels. You have so many choices, so many different things, and it's like now so hard. I never saw this, but my mom told me that in our country back in the day, they did arranged marriages, and it always worked.
Why did it work?
Because it was like that was you, and you were done. That was chosen for you, and that's it. And you had that one choice.
Right.
And then there's all these choices, and you're like, oh, maybe this not work. When I have a backup plan, and I have a backup here, and I have a backup plan.
Yeah. Well, sometimes arranged marriages can work, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes love choice marriages work, and sometimes they don't. But I think one of the things we have to remember is that our world is evolving in a way that is creating a lot of other pressures in people's lives. It's very expensive to live right now, and we are seeing, especially with the millennial generations, a lot of people feeling really frustrated, like they've gone to school, they have a lot of student loan debt. It's difficult to find, I was too. It's difficult to find work that will allow them to have the dream that they grew up hearing they should have.
So true. Oh my God.
Right? And so I think that scarcity creates a lot of other pressure with people when they think about partnering up. And so there's a lot of fear around commitment, because I don't know that I can fulfill the role that I think I'm supposed to play as a husband, as a wife, because the landscape looks so different for survival than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and certainly 50 years ago. And all of that, coupled with technology and what we see in the media, has shifted the way people are relating to each other.
If you had to predict the future, knowing the trends, I know you're not a psychic.
No.
but I mean, you see the trends. Do you see, the divorce rate going up, going down, staying the same?
That's a good question.
Because the odds are stacked against us. When you look at the technology and you look at how the world is flat now, and
the world is flat now?
Well, I mean, like what I mean by that is like you can access anybody anywhere.
Oh, sure.
Through the internet, you can just like, you can, it's not like, okay, you have access to just people in your neighborhood. You have people in America, Indonesia, China, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that I can say what a prediction would be, but here's a couple of observations. We're seeing a lot less people get married, actually, which is interesting. So I don't know how that's going to play out in terms of divorce rates.
Or getting married later.
Or getting married later, right? But I think that humans are typically cyclical. And so when we look back on culture, we tend to see sort of waves of pendulum shifts happening. And so right now, we might be seeing a lot of seismic shifts around feeling dissented around marriage, divorce. And as we reorganize what that means to us, in this growing age of technology and modern living, I think that we will see some dust settle, and then likely we will continue to shift, and there might be more increase in marriage later once we kind of repurpose and reorganize what it means to be a human today.
If you had to pick one area of your practice that you enjoy the most, I mean, look, when a client comes to me, and they want to, get in shape, or whether they want to lose weight, gain weight, put on muscle, or they want to work certain things more than certain other things, I know I have my favorite client.
What's your favorite?
One of my favorite clients, and for me, obviously, I love the client that wants to put on muscle, lose body fat,
Uh-huh.
and they have like, you know, different body types. For example, you know, I was a mesomorph on the bottom, you know, all that's technical stuff. Do you have a favorite part of your practice, or you know, that you say, well, these are the clients that I enjoy the most, you know, and I think that I'm fascinated with.
Yeah, let me think about that. So my practice is kind of broad in the sense that I treat trauma, I treat different kinds of addiction issues, I treat all different kinds of sexual dysfunction and compulsivity issues, and I also work with people in addressing their relationships. So when I think about the kinds of people that I'm most excited to work with, I can't really limit it to one kind of demographic group or anything like that, because what really gets me excited is helping, well, yeah, I mean, helping people tap into their resilience, I think, is the most exciting thing for me. So whether we're talking about addiction and recovery, or talking about infidelity and repair or healing from that, or we're talking about, you know, having some kind of resolve after a traumatic life situation, the thing that gets me really excited is helping people access that part of themselves that they didn't know existed but was there all along. And once they tap into that resilience, and they, oh, it's amazing.
It's like a whole different person.
Yeah, yeah. And they see all different kinds of growth in their relationships and their productivity at work, and you know, they're able to feel comfortable in their own skin, and that for me is like the really beautiful moment.
I'm fascinated by PTSD, you know, and for, I don't know, I hate to be insensitive sometimes, you know, I'm just one of those old school guys, but I think sometimes it's like, I can totally understand somebody, you know, having PTSD, you know, when they go into war and they'll see some things, but we see PTSD now where people are just like, well, I had a traumatic experience, you know, so-and-so called me this, and now, you know, I have PTSD, or so-and-so, you know, we got to fight and this happened. You know, do you see that a lot now? Like, as we are getting more and more advanced, and as humans, do you think that we're getting a little softer, and that we're getting a little more, you know, sensitive to every single thing?
That's a good question. I don't know that I would say we're getting more sensitive. I would say that we are acknowledging our sensitivities more, which is an important differentiation. But to your point about PTSD, I think that we often use the labels of mental health diagnoses to kind of just speak flippantly and casually, and that's, I think, maybe what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, people will say, oh, I'm so OCD, and that's just really not...
Self-diagnosed. I say that too. I think I self-diagnosed that myself.
Yeah, so I mean, when we do that, we
Never been
do
proven.
kind of like water down the strength of understanding what some of these diagnostic labels really mean, but the thing is, they're just labels. And so when I hear your question about PTSD and someone saying, oh, I've got PTSD from this one thing, someone called me a name. Now, trauma is a completely subjective experience,
Yes, true.
right?
Very
And
true.
what one person might experience to be no big thing, other people might be really destroyed by, because we have different ideas about who we are and the meaning of lots of different kinds of exchanges. So there's that. And then the other component about PTSD that I want to touch on is that when somebody says, I've got PTSD from this thing, I think what they might be trying to express, if they're talking more casually like that, is I feel traumatized by something. And that doesn't necessarily mean they do or do not meet criteria for PTSD, but when we think about the experience of a trauma, it results in our nervous system feeling really dysregulated in its arousal. So we experience a lot of hyperarousal. So that's a fancy clinical way of saying anxiety, or feeling like revved or frenetic in our energy, right? And then we might experience avoidance around the person, place, or thing that reminds us of that experience. We can experience intrusive thoughts about it, memories, dreams, nightmares. And, you know, we can also experience a lot of hypervigilance, right? So like kind of bracing and being prepared for another threat, whether it's physical or someone's sharp words or something like that. So, you know, are we softer? I don't know. Are we developing a vocabulary to express the layers of nuanced experiences that we all have? Yes. And in that way, I think it's kind of beautiful that, you know, people are being more open to talking about what they're feeling.
Wow, Doc, I can sit down and hear and talk to you about so much. I think we touched on, you know, the cell phone addiction. We talked about different types of drugs. We talk about PTSD,
Yeah.
why marriage fails, what women are complaining about men, what men are complaining about women. I can literally be here all day asking you questions, but I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
For people who want to learn more about you, your practice, and you know, maybe even talk to you, where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I've got a couple of different ways that people can reach me. I'm the co-founder of Triune Therapy Group in Los Angeles.
What is it called?
Triune Therapy Group. And people can check out all the services that we offer there. I have a new online platform launching in a few weeks called modernintimacy.com, and that's going to be a space where we have, thank you, we have a lot of content, written and video content, with all different kinds of experts and professionals from many different fields talking about the intersection between mental health, sexuality, and relationships. So for people who want more information about those things, they can find me there. You can always check out my Instagram at Dr. Kate BALESTRIERI, or send an email to info@modernintimacy.com, and I can help connect you with professionals or resources that way.
Well, Doctor, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for answering all my questions from all over, and I hope to have you back on the show very soon.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This was really fun. I appreciate it.
Of course. Hey guys, if you liked today's episode, do me a huge favor. Go ahead and leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel, leave me a review, and tag a few friends that you think can benefit from what we shared today. Really appreciate it. God bless.